Okay, so hi everyone. Today we're Brittain, and we're going to discuss a little bit about who he is and his experience in logistics. So, hey Brittain, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
Great, thank you. So, can you please tell us a little bit more about your experience and who you are?
Sure, I'm Brittain Ladd. I've been working in supply chain logistics for about 15 years now. I've been very lucky. I've lived and worked globally all throughout Latin America, lived in Saudi Arabia, lived in India, lived in China, lived in France and Germany. And I've been able to work on some really interesting projects at different companies. I've done WMS implementations, TMS implementations. I've done robotic implementations, micro fulfillment installations, and I've been really working over the last couple of years primarily on micro fulfillment for a new type of warehousing and fulfillment capability. But I've also done automation, large scale automation transformations in very large warehouses as well. And the thing that I'm going to continue focusing on really is always going to be, how do you integrate software? How do you integrate robotics? And how do you take all warehousing and frankly just make it more efficient? And how do you really make it even more relevant than it is today?
Awesome. And you know what, the robotics is really like the pinnacle of logistics these days. When it comes to warehouse logistics, or even when, I don't know, you're trying to integrate other parts of the supply chain. Have you had the chance to work with robotics in the past, or yeah?
Well, so I've actually been working with robotics to an extent since about 2013. So a lot of people, when they hear the term robotics, what they picture is actual robotics that walk, that type of robotics. And what I'm talking about is the robotics in terms of automated micro fulfillment centers, pallet build type of capabilities. So I've been working since about 2013 with this capability, this technology. I designed one of the first micro fulfillment centers, fully 100% automated robotic system. And I've been working with different companies globally on new types of robotics, which actually does include robotics to do fulfillment, but also that includes robotics, AMRs, AGVs, to transport product in a different way, to follow people as they work. And then I'm even working with a company right now on leveraging robotics as part of a last mile delivery program. So I've actually done quite a bit of work. I'd say I've done extensive work with robotics over the last several years.
That's amazing. It's really nice to hear. And what challenges are you experiencing right now at your current position?
Well, it's really interesting. The thing that I find is when the economy is good, a lot of executives are very willing to take risk. The minute the economy looks like it's going to slow down or possibly enter into a recession, oftentimes what I run into is there's a change in the strategy and executives become more risk averse. And so what I say to these executives is that it's irrelevant we're going to enter into a recession, that no matter what, the strategy that you're following, the strategy of implementing new robotics or new technology, building a new warehouse or whatever, you really should stay with that strategy, because the goal should be this. You can't control a recession, but you can control what you do during a recession, and you can control what you need to do to exit the recession and come out even stronger. And so the thing that I spend a lot more time doing is really keeping the executives I work with positive, really explaining to them there's no reason for them to be fearful, and that no matter what, we need to stick to the strategy so that when the company leaves the recession, they're much stronger than before they went in. So I don't really struggle to find people. I don't really struggle to find the resources who have the robotic technology experience. Really, it's mostly keeping the executives focused and keeping them committed to the strategy. That's really the problem I run into.
And what about the staff shortage that we've been experiencing these last few years after the pandemic? Have you struggled to find people to work, or have you had to raise their salaries to retain them at the company?
So it's interesting. So in certain aspects of the business, challenge we did encounter was not being able to find enough individuals to work in our warehouses. That was true. And so we were running about 40% less than we wanted to be, 40% less staff. There wasn't a lot we could really do. The challenge when it comes to shortages of labor is when one company raises the pay, everybody goes to that company. Then another company raises it and they leave and they go to that company. But you're really not hiring new people. You're just moving the same people from one facility.
Yeah, you're rotating the staff.
Exactly. So what we chose to do is that we changed our focus on several projects. We actually didn't take on some new business so that we weren't, where we weren't able to meet the customer expectation. We thought it made more sense. Don't take on additional business, only do the business that we could fulfill with the labor we had. And then what we did is that we continued to automate some of our other facilities, knowing full well that within about a year, we'll be able to operate our facilities with about 30% fewer people required. So we stuck to that strategy, and that's going to be our strategy long term. That's
a great achievement. And how did you achieve that? How did you manage to, let's say, continue the operation while reducing the personnel? Well,
so we had a shortage of people to begin with. And we had this opportunity to bring on additional customers, but we knew if we brought on the additional customers, we did not have enough labor to actually to provide the fulfillment needs of those other customers. So what we did is we worked with those customers. We found them some additional companies that we have partnerships with. They took their business there. And then we maintained a steady state in our facilities where we knew we could manage expectations to our customers with the small amount of staff we had, and that we didn't go out and try and keep fighting the same battles as everybody else, trying to hire people and bring them in only to watch them leave. And so my advice to companies is that whenever you're in a position where you truly have a shortage of labor, don't try and brute force something. It's best to give up bringing on new customers to make sure you can keep the customers you have, and then work through it to where then you make a decision that, do we now bring on more customers because I've hired people? Or do you make a decision maybe to make an acquisition of a company and you partner together so you can share resources? You have to really think through these things.
Yeah, that's a very smart way to handle the situation. And what about the supply chain issues and the stock you need to fill your warehouses? How did you experience that through this pandemic?
So that was interesting. We actually were going to have some installations of several robotic systems, micro fulfillment centers. And at the beginning of 2021, they were confident that absolutely they would have everything we needed to begin the project in 2022. But as we got into 2022, what the companies, the vendors we worked with identified is that they were unable to get all of the product we needed because they had disruptions in their supply chain. So we were not able to begin several installations at several facilities because we didn't have the equipment, we didn't have the software. There are many things that there was a shortage on. So all we did was this. We identified absolutely where we could focus, where we did have enough product to install. And the other projects we just simply have postponed now to 2023. We didn't try and brute force anything. We thought, well, maybe we'll try and find some product from other vendors. When we tried to do that, we realized there was always something different in the specifications, and it was going to cause us to do some customization during the installation, and I didn't want to do that. So we simply have moved it off to 2023, Q2 of 2023 to be exact. And now the vendor is working with their manufacturer, and we're 100% confident that when at the end of Q2 and the beginning of Q3 2023 rolls around, we will have that product we need and we can begin the installations. But I've been impacted like many other companies because of the shortage. There's shortages everywhere. And the challenge is this: when there's truly a shortage and you don't have an alternative way of sourcing other product, again, take a look at what your project plan is and just start focusing on those things you can control. So I didn't stress about it. I didn't really try and, again, force something. We just simply changed our strategy and said, well, what can we do? And we've just been working on the things we can control.
Yeah, then last week I was talking to another guy in he works in a company where they sell like bakery products, and this are across many bakeries. And what they did to be able to maintain their operation was to purchase ahead a lot of stock for 6 months in advance, even a year in advance for certain things that were seasonal. So they wouldn't reduce their delivery to their customers at the expense of course, incurring a lot of cost for not only storage, but having all that inventory in stock. And that forced them to also have to reach out to other distribution centers and outsource part of the operation. So in this case, I understand that instead of going through that road, you just limited the amount of production you might had and kind of optimize the resources you had. I think every company would be in a different position. In your case, were you be able just to maintain the operation with like a minimal amount of product, or did you even consider, hey, let's just outsource part of the process to a distribution center or something like that? Or what do you think about that?
Well, so some of our clients, some of our customers are retailers. And the thing that I warned them against was do not place orders for massive amounts of inventory with the assumption that there's going to be further disruptions. I said, what I believe is going to happen is far too many retailers are going to order too much product. It's going to arrive, but what's going to happen is that the customer is going to want different product. And the reason why I believe that was going to happen is that these retailers were ordering the products far too in advance to understand what was going to be in style, what were the trends, and frankly, what were the customers going to want. Now, these customers, they thought they really knew their business. They thought they understood the industry. So some of them bought a full year's worth of product in advance. What I've noticed right away, however, is that even though they had the inventory on hand, the customers weren't buying the products that they were putting in the store. And so what's happened is some of the clients that I could have worked with but chose not to, they're having to reduce the cost, the price of the product they're selling by 90%. So they're not only going to have an extensive amount of loss on the product they're selling, but they have an extensive additional expenses this year and last year because of the increased logistics costs for all of the stuff that they ordered and shipped over, and they actually sent some of it by air. So what I wanted to do with my clients is I said, look, we don't want to get into the game of carrying too much inventory and tying up all of our working capital. Simply minimize the amount of business you're willing to do this year. And if you lose some customers, that's part of the game. Because I said, what I think will happen is the customers we lose, they're going to be the ones, though, who make a bad decision. And they're going to eventually come to us in 2023 saying, can you take this excess inventory off our hands? And I said, so by then, we should be able to find additional people that we can hire. We will start seeking out some additional warehouses. And our plan for 2023 is we plan on taking the majority of the inventory that some of our customers were not able to sell. We're going to even take the inventory from some of the customers we lost, and we're going to work through it, get rid of it for them, and then we're going to re-engage with those customers probably in the January, February timeframe, maybe March, and we're going to sit down and we're going to replan their entire inventory strategy, supply chain strategy, everything, because what they proved to themselves is this: they don't know how to make the right decisions, and they made decisions based on gut feel than data. And so we now have a great opportunity to teach them of what not to do. And then our job is to say, this is how we can actually respond in the supply chain, be very proactive in the supply chain, and that we can eliminate a lot of the risk that they believe they were under.
I think we could call this episode "How to Manage a Pandemic Smartly."
Well, in all honesty, that's what we've been that's what I've been really working on since last year. It's how do you work with companies to make the right decisions after
Yeah.
a pandemic. And then more importantly, it's how do you help a company not make an even worse decision? And that's what the story of retail has been this year. All of these big retailers with all of these high paid executives and all these supply chain teams, millions of dollars in software investment, and they all made the wrong decision. I shouldn't say all, the majority of them did. And now they're struggling because of it.
Yeah, they made almost the same mistakes. Probably they had to incur in debt to finance all these stock. So probably they're in a very similar position. And now we are kind of at the verge of crisis that we don't really know if it's going to materialize or not. It's weird. But what I'm thinking is, if the crisis that happened, it might present other opportunities. For instance, the personnel wouldn't be in a shortage anymore. Perhaps all these supply chain issues would get up to speed, and now we will have like regular delivery from different suppliers and vendors. So let's say that's happened. How would you approach this situation? And my guess is the same way you just did with the pandemic.
That's pretty much true. We don't know how bad it's going to get. There are different estimates on how bad the recession can become. But what I believe is this: you always want to run your business based on science. And what that means is data, analytics, running models to optimize and get a better understanding of what your current state, what's the performance of your ecosystem, where are your costs, where are there opportunities to increase performance, but more importantly, where are there opportunities to reduce costs and complexity. And so what I'm really saying to everybody is that when you're in a recession like this, or a recession we're about to enter, you're going to experience a significant decrease in demand. And because you're experiencing a significant increase in demand, you're going to have less need for actual movement of the product. So your supply chain is going to slow down. And now it's a great opportunity, frankly, to run analysis on your supply chain and get a better understanding of, once we're back to peak demand or optimal demand, what network do we really need? Is now a great time to shut down a warehouse and open up a warehouse at another location? Should we actually look at maybe selling some of our facilities and partnering with somebody else? So the main thing is, run the business based on the data, run the business based on the actual performance of the supply chain, of what's required. But again, take advantage of this opportunity and say, let's start planning for 2023. Let's start planning for 2024. And we don't know how long a recession is going to last, but historically they last between 6 to 9 months. So let's say 2023 is a disaster. So what are you going to do in 2024? Well, by 2024, you should have a plan in place of saying, we're confident this is the number of customers we'll have. This is the number of shipments we're going to be fulfilling on a daily basis. This is going to be basically our supply chain needs. And we also plan on actually expanding to other areas in the US or whatever. Well, what is that going to take in 2024 then to do that? Be planning for that now, put the right team in place to be doing that now so that you're prepared. The worst thing that companies can do is simply sit around and continue talking about, wow, I wonder how long this recession is going to last. Who cares? You can't control it. You can't control it anyway. So focus on doing things to start making your business better and start doing things that will allow you to exit the recession better, faster, and stronger. I can't stress that enough.
And that's where technology comes in. So I understand, like, you're, I would say, like an expert in robotics, right? So how do you envision the future combining software and let's say hardware to automate warehouses as much as possible? And also, since which size of warehouse do you think it's possible to start getting companies in the top-notch technology that makes sense, of course, financially and operationally?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So number one, it's all going to come down to a financial measurement for sure. So how much can a company afford? But all companies have different needs. And it also depends on the size of the warehouses. If you're a company, if you're an Amazon, for example,
Yeah.
you're not concerned. You're not concerned about putting automation in your facilities. You know you can cover that cost. Walmart the same way. But if you're a small to mid-sized business, you really should absolutely get an understanding of where would we leverage technology. In essence, what should be our technology strategy, our robotic strategy, our automation strategy. You certainly want to be asking those questions. But what you really also want to be asking is, so in addition to adding technology, automating, what other things can we be doing? And this is the thing where this is the part where it gets interesting, because I often find a lot of executives think if only we could automate our warehouses, we'd be in a better position. But then when I evaluate the procurement process, I evaluate their transportation, and I see that in 25% of the lanes where they're moving freight, the trailers are only 30% full or something. So they're not maximizing available capacity. You want to look at everything across the supply chain that drives cost. And the big thing always comes down to transportation. So don't forget to examine your transportation spend, your transportation network, at the same time you're interested or in the process of automating facilities. So the challenge I run in with these executives is they latch onto the shiny object. And the shiny object really is automation in a warehouse. And they focus on that. And I'm like, no, time out. What else should we take a look at? Certainly transportation, procurement, working capital. How much of your working capital is tied up in inventory? Do you have a handle on that? And so oftentimes what I find is that by doing a combination of things, companies really can achieve significant cost savings. They can increase their performance, but more importantly, they actually can pay for a lot of the upgrades in technology and software just from the savings of doing things better in other areas of their company. So that's how I always look at this. I certainly encourage companies to explore automation, but don't forget, make sure you're measuring and evaluating everything that you're doing across your supply chain anyway. Always look for all potential areas of cost. And when you find it, trim it, make it better.
And for, let's say a warehouse decides to put robotics on their warehouse, how long would you say is the time to get a return on that investment? So compared to the savings it produces, of course.
So it depends on what you're doing. So for like a micro-fulfillment center, return on investment on a typical micro-fulfillment center, fully automated, it's about 18 to 24 months. In some of the larger warehouses, I've seen it as low as 12 to 15 months, even though they're larger. It's just simply because of the total amount of volume that you're scaling across the technology. So the return on investment on most of these investments is actually fairly soon, within 1 to 2 years. So it's an investment well worth making, frankly. The payoff is gigantic. Once companies start to embrace technology and they leverage automation, it helps them look across their entire network, their entire ecosystem, and say, wow, look what else we can be automating. And that's what I say to companies. Once you make the decision to automate, look across your entire company, automate every single process that you can find. Because only by doing that are you truly going to maximize the ROI.
Awesome. I was under the impression that it would take longer to get an ROI on the investment because, again, from my point of view, the hardware seems to be expensive. So I'm actually thrilled to hear that. It's not so bad if you can get your money back in 2 years, for instance. For a company, that's not really a long time. But the end result is that you can not only cut costs, but also keep things under control. And if you have, for instance, the right KPIs and you have a dashboard where you can constantly check how things are going, even reduce, I don't know, human mistakes, that sort of stuff. And then now coming into software, and here I'd like to understand a little bit better. So have a company, or you work at a company, or are you a consultant? What is it that you do
So
exactly?
I basically am a 1099 contractor. I'm a consultant, and I do two things. I either provide consulting and advising, or I fill internal roles, internal corporate roles. So I fill roles sometimes where I'm an acting vice president of supply chain, or I'm a chief supply chain officer, or whatever. And so as part of those roles, what I'm tasked with is evaluating the current state, people, process, technology,
Okay.
all operations. And then I put together gap analysis. I say, well, based on my analysis, these are some gaps that I've noticed within your process, and if these are strategies that we can use to close the gaps. And this is a strategy for how we actually can implement anything I'm recommending, whether it's a software upgrade, technology, robotics, or whatever, or simply conducting supply chain network optimization studies of the network, and then identifying what changes in the network need to be made.
Okay, so you're like a fractional VP of supply chain and logistics
True.
for
So
different
to an
companies.
extent, that's a fair way to describe what I do. Yes.
Great. So now coming into software, how do you see the WMS software space? What would you say is the adoption of companies, like in general, let's say small and mid-sized companies, because of course the big ones have a lot of budget and resources, but let's say small and mid-sized companies, what's your impression of the market? How much are they leveraging software for that?
Well, it's interesting. I've seen different statistics. I've seen measurements as high as 50%, 60% of even small to mid-sized businesses are leveraging some form of a WMS. I actually think that's way too high. In my experience, the number's really closer to 25 to 30% for small to medium-sized companies. But what I'm seeing is that it's hard for executives, no matter how large the company, to get away from the fact that their supply chains have to operate better, their logistics have to operate better. They realize they really can't do this with Excel anymore. For years, there were companies, even very large companies, that had teams of people just building one spreadsheet after another. And that's how they were running their supply chain, even their warehouses. The good news is also there's lots of new entrants on the market. They have more affordable warehouse management systems,
Yeah.
some even better transportation management systems. So I definitely can say there's going to be an increased adoption to this technology. But the really big thing that I'm going to see is more of a warehouse execution system, a WES. And the reason why the WES market's growing so quickly is because now even small to mid-sized companies are saying, well, there are some robotics I can install. There is automation. So I need something that allows me to run the robotics in my warehouse, plus integrate with my WMS and my TMS. So I have an integrated capability within my warehouse to run all of my operations. So that's what also I'm seeing increase and expect to see to continue to increase for the next several years.
Well, one thing I noticed in that area though is small companies, especially, they have, let's say, an ERP that has an inventory module, and they think that that's a WMS because they have some inventory there. But most of the time, for instance, filling that inventory process is really dramatic because inventories are not right. They have a lot of mistakes. It's not integrated with, let's say, their suppliers. Because nowadays you can, even if you have a fulfillment center through a WMS, you could connect to your, let's say, distributor or your distribution center or your suppliers, and even get to know if the stock of some product is going to be in a shortage in few days or something. So I think there's also a lack of education and understanding of what all these systems are. It's kind of hard to keep up with, like, all the different terms and technology and what means what. And sometimes they even just assign this to a systems engineer who's in charge of the system, right? So, and this person doesn't even really understand what are the options available. So I think there's an effort to be made to keep educating people in the industry around all these solutions, and so the future looks better. And I think regarding what you say about the robotics, it's a perfect time for companies right now to invest there, because the personal shortage and also competitiveness. I've been in Japan, for instance, and there are a lot of jobs that people really don't do anymore. Even you could go to a bar or a restaurant and you have a robot preparing you a drink, or you would just get like the dishes served in the plate you would order there, and there's, I don't know, like a machine giving you the you order. So what I'm thinking is, and that also happens in Europe. Many countries, especially Nordic not companies, countries, are investing more and more in machines, automation, and we have a lot of jobs that are still being performed by humans that, in the way I see it, it's very inefficient and make the economy to be less productive. So my guess is that in the future, we're going to continue seeing more and more of hardware and software doing a lot of these tasks, and all these people will eventually transition into other areas of the economy. For instance, anyone can just go nowadays, go to YouTube, learn how to do websites or manage social media, start an agency, and maybe these are people that used to work at a warehouse or doing part of the production process, and now they're moving to a digital economy. So I only see this becoming worse and worse over time. So let's say, what if you had, like, let's say, an audience of small and medium companies, what would you advise them to, as a roadmap to transition into the future and prepare for what's coming?
Well, the main thing is to step back and ask this question. Number one, why do we exist? So why does that company even exist? What are they there to do? What is it that they produce? The second question is, will we still need to exist in 5 years? So in essence, what's going on in their industry? And they need to make sure that they're focused on the things taking place in their industry that have some longevity. So they need to ask those questions first. And then what they also need to ask is, so what are our goals? You know, what is our goal by 2030? What is it that we want to be doing? How large do we want to be in 2030 or 2025 or whatever? So they need to be asking those questions. And then what they have to do is this: work from the customer backward, their customer backwards. What is it we do for that customer? How do we deliver it? What do we provide, and so forth? And you work backwards from that customer. And then you identify, so of everything that we do, how much of that's manual today? Where in the future do we think we can actually leverage better software, change the process, or maybe leverage automation? And so it's a way to do an analysis that says, as we grow as a company and as we progress through the next several years through the rest of this decade, this is where we anticipate we're going to have an opportunity to reduce our costs through automation. This is where we can leverage software to do different things. But then this is really how we're going to leverage software automation to help us actually do things better for our customers. But at the end of the day, what they have to do more than anything is truly understand their supply chain. And the thing I always say to people is this: there is only one reason why a supply chain exists, only one. And that is to enable growth. And so no matter how big the company is, they always need to make sure that what they have is a supply chain that will enable their growth. And then what they have to have is the ability to execute for everything that they have to provide to a customer. And as long as they do that, they're going to be fine, or they'll be in a better position.
Great. So thanks for that. I think those are great words and a clear action path, by starting by questioning where you are at the moment. So now I'll take a moment to talk about our sponsors. So BGS software is a warehouse management um, system that helps companies actually integrate all the different process of the picking and also the slotting, optimizing the placement of the different products in the warehouse to reduce the distance cover in the picking process, as well as getting KPIs and keep track of every single touch point at your warehouse. So now to wrap up, first I like to thank you for being in the show. It's very, very interesting understanding first how to prepare for the upcoming potential crisis, all these nice ideas about how to deal with the pandemic, supply chain shortage, while keeping in mind the working capital. So I think that has been really great, and I don't know. I love to have you in the show again. Maybe we can do something better in the future, a webinar for our audience or something. So I really want to thank you for being in the show. And any last words?
No, other than to say thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. More than happy to come back anytime. We can do a webinar, whatever you'd like. So yeah, Santiago, really, really enjoyed this, and thank you again.
And where can people find you if they would like to get in contact with you?
The easiest thing to do is reach out to me via LinkedIn. I'm Brittain Ladd. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can contact me through my email address, bcladd48@gmail.com.